I mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. One of my big questions was going to be, where does the focus lie in this draft? Is it the captains? Is it the junglers? Is it the carries? Looks like the junglers are absolutely the answer there. Crawl locked in for SpaceStation, and SK going to pick up a petal.
Yeah, and this petal, I like the pick there because it is flexible. It can go to either the lane or the jungle if need be. And the option for maybe something like an alpha is still there for SK, although that's a very risky matchup going into a Krull. Krull generally wins out in a Krull versus alpha head-to-head. So the question for me is going to be this Kestrel still being available. Obviously, SpaceStation loved the Kestrel pickup, and I don't see SK really going for it here.
Most likely not. The Saw Van is also a very interesting one. It's because SpaceStation played it last week very well, and honestly, even going up against G2, they barely took wins off of them. And as you're approaching this stage where if you need every win and you don't want to even lose a single matchup, you want to remove the cheesy picks from your opponent's hero pools. And Saw is being one of those cheesy picks because he can push down turrets very effectively in the early game.
Yeah, and it's one of those heroes that can be very difficult to deal with. You can fall into a deficit without even really noticing until it's much too late exactly what he's doing. So Baptiste being the ban for SpaceStation, generally that ends up taking Catherine off the board a little bit as well. But SK, they want this Lance pick. So Lance, Arden, Catherine, Lyra, those are the big captains on Update 2.9. Will continue to be the trend as we go into Update 2.10, but for now, those are the focus for captains.
Also the Grace, we've seen a lot, especially in Europe coming
in Europe especially, we've seen a lot of Grace combined with heroes that can dive well or kite well to protect the carry. So SpaceStation at this point have multiple choices. Arden and Lyra are still very still open, and they're the strongest. I'm actually surprised that SK picked the Lance over the two. It means they want to either protect the carry really well or dive extremely hard. If that's going to be a petal weapon power, then you're probably going to see them trying to protect her more than try and dive in. SpaceStation, 10 seconds on the clock. They need to decide fast.
Certainly do, and Lyra will be that decision. So getting an extra bit of sustain, a bit of healing, so that when the Joker is going in on that Crawley has an extra bit of life to work with.
And this last pick will go a long way in not only determining what SpaceStation is going to be trying to do in these fights, but also how SK is going to build this composition. Because if they don't take anything that has big AoE, then all of a sudden this petal, you likely just run at Crystal Power. But with a Baron there, now all of a sudden a decision has to be made on SK because they don't really have the hard dive in their composition right now to deal with a Baron.
No, not really, and they don't have too many options to go for that either. I mean, the Blackfoot has already been taken, but we could see the Reza come out. If they go for the Reza, play Petal, Weapon Power in lane, and then have the Lance, that's a composition that can dive onto the Baron somewhat effectively, but going up against the Cruel, Reza does not do too well in the early game.
And once again, this is Update 2.9 for anyone who might get a little giddy at seeing the Baron there. The crystal buffs have not come through yet. That will be next week. But so it is almost guaranteed to be a weapon Baron up in the lane for SpaceStation.
Now, things like the Alpha are still available, so if they do send that petal to the lane, there are a couple of dive heroes.
Another one that could be very effective is Ozo, but they do go for the Reza. I mentioned it earlier. Makes sense because they played it last week. Tyrus is very well on it, and it works perfectly in terms of you just want to dive very hard. And the Netherland detonation does not get blocked by the Bulwark, so it does well against the Lyra as well. SK Gaming and SpaceStation have good compositions, in my opinion. It's just about execution at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. We have two very good compositions, but two very different styles of composition as well. I'm excited to see Hegman on that Lance as well. We've seen Hegman can really perform on that captain pick, but classed on Lyra, the same can be said. So I'm curious to see how this matchup is going to pan out. Who are we expecting to be aggressive in the early game here?
For me, it's going to have to be this Krull trying to go aggressive to shut down the Reza and prevent Tyrus from getting to his item spikes for as long as possible. Because once this Reza starts to come online, when he dives onto the backline, when he dives onto the Baron, there's not much there to keep a Baron safe from that Reza dive.
Exactly. I mean, SK have very clear power spikes, but they take a while to come online. It's going to be the Aftershock for Reza and the Sora Blade, and then level 8 for Petal in the lane role. So it's the mid game that SK will have to push really hard, and for SpaceStation to delay that mid game to allow the Baron scale before getting pressured too hard, they're gonna have to pressure the early game with the Cruel, like you mentioned, Tasty Bacon. So both of these teams have very clear power spikes that they can abuse. It's different timings for the power spikes, so it's about their understandings and how well they can push those power spikes.
Yeah, understanding what their composition does and how to abuse that, and it only becomes harder when there's this much pressure on the game. Let us know who you are supporting going into this game. Hashtag Vainglory8 on Twitter. SK Gaming are vying for their spot at Worlds, but they've got to take this quarterfinal first against SpaceStation. Let's pass it back over to Jaws and Sean Ostino to kick this one off.
Thank you very much, Munch. It's me, Jaws, and joined by Sean Ostino. I'm ready to get into this game. SK versus SpaceStation, and what a position for SpaceStation to be in. Not SK, because SpaceStation have the opportunity here to actually upset SK, which has happened over the last coming weeks, Sean. We've seen SK fall to teams we wouldn't necessarily think they'd actually fall to. So this game's going to be very important, and we'll see who can take them. We'll see if SpaceStation can take them to a game 3.
That's very true, Jaws. SpaceStation has been doing really well. Previously known as Salty Potatoes, they've been able to come up, like pull themselves up by their bootstraps, if you will, in the past few weeks of the Vainglory8. But yeah, right now, SK and G2, who are up at the top of this 2-horse race, they only have 3 points separating them. But if SpaceStation Gaming is able to pretty much upset one of the two titans here, SK, then things could look very different for SK by the end of this weekend, even going into Worlds. They may not make it to Worlds if SpaceStation Gaming has their way with them.
Class just stole that, by the way, with a sigil, so already SpaceStation off to a fairly good start. You'd think 3 members from SK could secure an Elder Treant, but the Lyra way too strong in the early game. Does manage to secure that, no worries. Joker, though, and Class making a rather aggressive roam into SK's jungle. Tyrus might be in a little bit of trouble. Hashi has to troublemaker away. Hegman is going to have to rotate as well. Treant goes over, but this time it's going to go over to Joker. SpaceStation off to a flying start.
Yeah, they're off to a pretty good start. If you actually look, there's just a few hundred gold in their favor here, but they're invading the jungle a lot, and there's a lot of poke going on to Tyrus.
Yeah, they're going very aggressive. Impale does end up missing. Class will use that sigil for the speed boost. Cavalifar did rotate down from the lane as well, and Sneaky is there also. He's level 3. He's going to jump jets forward. Cavalifar taking a lot of damage in the front line, but they should just be able to disengage. A lot of mobility on the side of SK. They're just going to have to give up the rest of their jungle for it.
If you take a look at SpaceStation Gaming, we have a lot of dive potential here, obviously. The Cruel can sit in those bushes and get the the shadows to empower him, and he can actually just dive in with those Dead Man's Rush, get a pretty good barrier out of that as well. And, of course, the sigils here, when we pop the sigils on this Lyra here, the Class is playing, they're able to get even more of a boost in, and they also have some protective capabilities, too. Class can throw down those barriers with the bright bulwarks and prevent a lot of dive from Tyrus coming in, from Hegman with those potential impales, the trampolines as well. So we have a lot of protection on the side of SpaceStation Gaming. What I would expect them to do too later on, since we do have a double weapon power composition here, I would expect Joker on this Cruel to build some of that armor shred. We need him to get a bone saw so that he'll be able to shred that those metal jackets that will potentially be coming out from SK.
Yeah, we've seen that a bit more often as well. Obviously, the classic first item for the Cruel was normally that tension bow, but that bone saw coming online, like you mentioned, is just going to help Sneaky and propel him in the late game. I'm always excited to see a Baron also, Sean. I'm not going to lie. I'm kind of happy that teams are picking him up again, because I think I've had enough of Kestrel Lane. I love the siege. It's cool to see a turret go down early, but I like seeing Baron 2 to 3 hit somebody. I think that's a lot more entertaining. SpaceStation are going to just chase down Tyrus. That's Elder Treant did go over to Tyrus this time around. Kalas with the small rotation as well was just a bit late to help Joker, but Joker is level 5, has a level up on Tyrus also. It's going to start this invade all over again.
Yeah, it looks like they're going in, and Tyrus, it's getting aggressed on.
Wrong place, wrong time. SK are just not having a break. Joker is really willing to take them in the early game. Tyrus hasn't even completed his first item, really needs to back as well. There's about 1,200 gold in his back pocket, where Joker has managed to back and has picked up a couple of recipe items as well.
He has. He's building up some more of that gold so he can work towards that bone saw potentially. He does have the necessary items to build it. Tyrus, yeah, he's sitting on 1,500 gold now, so he needs to pick up his Aftershock if he's going to make a bit of a difference here. We know that once Aftershock is on Reza, he's able to make such a big difference, especially because his Firestarter procs, bonus damage coming out of the Troublemaker following. If he has an Aftershock, then he's able to do even more bonus damage and lifesteal as well. So that's going to be a pretty good item spike for him in this game. But in addition, I'd like to see for Hegman at some point in this game. Obviously, we're going to get later in the game when he picks up an Echo, because peeling for his team and doing some either double stuns with the Githian walls or double impales just to root down some of the more mobile members of the side of SpaceStation Gaming, like Sneaky, they're going to be able to really capitalize that and just dive in on Sneaky once he's rooted up.
Joker is level 6 though. Speaking about rooting people up, a big old stun will certainly end the life of Cavalifar or Tyrus if they're not careful, especially as Tyrus is a little bit more behind than he is on Joker right now. He's just hit that level 6, so is keeping up the level lead at least. Keeping up the level at least. Class is going to get jumped on here. Impel does land. Bright Ball Wipe, but Githian Wall is going to come out, forcing the flask usage. Cavalifar doing a fair bit of damage early on. Picked up that Sorrow Blade, but Sneaky has got a Sorrow Blade plus a 6 sins in his inventory, so inching ahead in that regard. Joker may be looking for a little something here. He's just going to plant himself in the bush like every crawl does. He's going to walk up as well. He's going to get spotted, so SK now know they need to play fairly safe. But Tyrus, he's got his first item online, and that's going to be the Aftershock. So we'll see if SK will actually want to do anything with that.
Yeah, we'll see if they want to do anything. The Aftershock, that's going to be really good, just like what we were talking about earlier. He hasn't capitalized on it quite yet, and the longer we get into the game, you know, the longer that, the less that item power spike is going to make a bit of a difference. But I would expect him, it looks like he is building a Crystal Bit there. He could be going into any number of things, as we know with the new items that we have here. He could be, I would expect him, I would like to see him going into a Broken Myth to get some shield pierce later on. But we'll be seeing what he's going to be building into. Look, we have actually a Fountain on Class right now. So we've been seeing a lot of Lyras actually go Crucible or Fountain when it comes to their first item build. But it looks like Class is going for the more sustain, the burst sustain with that Fountain, and Tyrus goes in.
Yeah, SK really want to make something happen, but Sneaky is notoriously hard to gank on this Baron. With the jump jets, he can easily get out of there, and Class obviously has the Bright Bulwark as well. So SpaceStation, they do have a lot of tools to disengage this Baron or engage. In fact, Joker may be looking for a little something, and although a Bright Bulwark will instantly get used again, I want to know what's going to happen when Class hits level 6 here, because SpaceStation, speaking of that level 6, he just hit it, he's got that passageway available to him now as well, so he can transport Sneaky straight into a Bright Bulwark, and he's going to be on top of Cavalifar and Tyrus, which is kind of where Tyrus wants to be. But if Sneaky gets strong enough with that tension bow pickup as well now, Tyrus is going to need to stack armor pretty early on to avoid taking the majority of that damage, or at least the initial brunt force. Joker, obviously, like you said, has picked up that Bone Saw as well now, so he's hit a nice little power spike for him, shredding that armor in the front line like you were mentioning.
Yeah, it's an interesting interaction when you do have a comp that kind of wants to dive and kind of wants to protect the carry as well. We have the Joker wanting to get in there and provide a distraction and peel, and oh, it looks like they're going in.
Ooh, Impale does end up landing. Bright Bulwark stopping him for the time being, but a massive rocket actually comes through for Sneaky. Hits Tyrus and Cavalifar, forcing them to both pop Flask. They're going to have to back off rather sharpish. And in fact, Tyrus is going to have to get that Fountain used on him as well. Sneaky just dodging in and out of these Impales. They're completely unharmed. Cavalifar not so much, though. SK, they're going to go down, and that'll be first blood to SpaceStation. Now Tyrus trying to get on the back with a Netherform detonation, but Class will pick up that kill as well, and they're going to be able to secure the first turret.
8 minutes 40 seconds in, and Sneaky is just doing so much work here on this Baron. He's only got 2 items, but we know how detrimental this is going to be now for SK. The Sorrow Blade and Tension Bow mix. Tension Bow has fallen off. It's gotten a little bit of a nerf, and with the changes to life, we've actually had the base health is actually so much larger, so it doesn't have quite the impact it does, but they're going in for more.
They want to go in for another engagement. Hegman is already pretty low, but now they spotted Cavalifar. He's completely left on his own, trampolined away, but Tyrus is on the back line, exactly where he needs to be. Sneaky ends up falling. Nice Githian wall onto Joker, but he's not done quite yet. Hegman extremely low. Tyrus trying to just disrupt him. He ends up taking him down in the end. SK, they do reclaim 2 for 0, and they're going to be able to secure gold miner.
Oh no. Well, this, for SpaceStation Gaming, that last fight was just a disaster, and they weren't able to capitalize and do that much from the previous team fight that they won up in the lane. Clast is getting hunted down by Tyrus, but it looks like he's just going to back off. But SK coming back with full force. They rotated down into the jungle, and they separated SpaceStation Gaming. So Joker was diving in, Sneaky was all by himself, and he got hunted down by Tyrus. Tyrus, you leave him alone. He's going to be able to do so much work. He does have that broken myth now, and he's prioritizing some armor as well. They really want to protect themselves against the burst damage that's coming out of this Baron. And Baron is already working towards some Tyrant's Monocle. It looks like he's going to be able to get that crit damage down too. I would hope that later on he works on Tornado Trigger so he can get that damage per second up, as well as some additional crit. But yeah, things still could go either way in this game, Jaws.
Definitely so. With Cavalifar picking up that Tornado Trigger, he's going to be a bit more of a nuisance. Oh my goodness. He is going towards that Monocle build. You can imagine that's going to be next on his list after that initial bit of damage coming out from Sorrow Blade and the Tension Bow. I don't know, Tornado Trigger. I like double Monocle because you're more than likely going to one-shot somebody, but hey-ho. SK now, obviously, they have lost a turret, and this is an extremely important game, and the desk did touch on it as well. I'll speak about that in a second, as SpaceStation are just trying to take this Century. They do end up defeating it, and that'll be just SK losing one of their defensive lines, or at least there's only got 2 more lives left. They've got lane priority now as well. They are going to be able to push this in more often than not and look for picks with that Cruel Ultimate.
Yeah, the Cruel Ultimate is what is going to be a lot of the dive that needs. Once that initiates, that is where SpaceStation Gaming really needs to engage on their target. And if they're able to lock down Cavalifar or Tyrus, namely Cavalifar here though, because he is a pretty big damage threat. And he's the more consistent damage threat. Once you lock him down and take him out, then a lot of these auto attacks are going to be shut down. And Hegman goes.
Oh, 2-man impale. That was good. Githian wall as well, but Tyrus is trying to get onto Sneaky. Already healed up with the fountain there. The form detonation onto 2 people. Sneaky still trying to kite back. Does use those jump jets. Cavalifar follows up the trampoline and takes him out. Joker is still trying to kill Tyrus. Class is fairly high HP as well. Tyrus out of the fight for the moment, and Joker now just taking the brunt force of Cavalifar's build, just kiting and kiting and kiting and kiting away, and ends up just cutting him down a passageway, trying to kill Tyrus, trying to kill him just to at least secure 1 kill. But SK, they're going to be able to find the ace and push down the lane as well.
SK finding the plays here, and that's exactly what they need to do. One of their win conditions here is they've got to keep Cavalifar alive, and we saw earlier in the game, this turret is going down actually. Tier 1 turret's down for SK doing some work here. Cavalifar, as long as he stays alive, he's able to output so much damage on this weapon power pedal. He just kites around the fights, and you saw there that Joker was backing off and trying to get some distance between himself and Cavalifar, but just because Cavalifar did not give up, it just kept kiting, moving around the fight, he was able to burst him down so much. And if you look at it, it's 2-1 right now for Cavalifar, and it's 5-2 right now for SK. It's not that high of a scoring game right now, but still a lot of work being done.
SK want to go for another engage. Cavalifar just pounding the front line, like you said. Joker taking the brunt of that. Tyrus hiding in the bush, actually. Netherform detonation on the back. Sneaky is going to use those jump jets. Takes a large chunk out of Tyrus, but he's still kiting forwards. Triple impale. Githian wall as well available. Sneaky has to use that rocket jump yet again, and Tyrus is just still sticking to him like glue, uncontested on the back line. Githian wall onto Joker, and now is a 3v2. Cavalifar left completely unmanned. That passageway is going to lead him to safety for the time being, but Class didn't last long at all, and that'll be SK finding another 2 kills.
Hegman taking the defensive passage there to actually hunt down Class was really well done. That's the thing with Hegman. They're actually capitalizing it actually really well right now, taking advantage of this gold miner here. But Hegman, as a Lance, he actually has quite a bit of damage himself. And with his Partisan's technique, even though he's got slow attack speed, he's able to just reach so far with that Lance of his and able to poke from distance. Really well done by him. Look at him. He's sitting at 2-0-5 right now. And Tyrus, 3-1-4. Just so much assist and really good sharing of these team fights between the members of SK. We have a double tornado trigger on Cavalifar right now. The attack speed and the crit damage is just ridiculous coming out of him at the moment, Jaws.
Tyrus was the man to watch, Sean Ostino. And this is exactly why. You know he's going to be able to show up in clutch situations and clutch matches like this. They did lose that first tier turret, but now coming back with a 2-7 score lead with a 4,000 gold lead to boot as well. They were able to secure 2 gold miners in this game, while SpaceStation, even though they look to have the massive early advantage, even first blood onto Sneaky, aren't able to make anything just happen yet. However, Sneaky is building and building and building up, and when he hits those 4 items, he is going to be one terrifying Baron. And they may have looked, or at least tried to find another engage. Impale does go a little bit wide. SpaceStation have found Tyrus off on his own. But like I mentioned earlier on, Sean, is the fact that SK have so much mobility, especially since Hegman is level 6 as well. He can just combat roll. He can barrel roll out of any situation, even barrel roll into situations like this. There's going to be a big bright bulwark going to stop him for the time being. There comes the Ion Cam, but it's not going to matter. Tyrus already on the back line. Sneaky is just getting chased out, just separating himself from the rest of the team. Defensive passageway used. They finally killed Tyrus, but are they going to be able to do anything else? No, they are not. That trampoline from Cavalifar was good, and it ends up killing Sneaky, and now he's just trying to fight the Treant, or at least Kalas is trying to fight the Treant for some reason. EU Treant came up strong, and that'll be SpaceStation taking 2 kills at the price of 1, and the Kraken is on the board, and oh boy, Joker wants to do it.
He wants to do it. And Cruel is not necessarily the fastest at taking objectives here. We do have Hegman wanting to contest a little bit and distract. But Cavalifar and Tyrus diving in after Sneaky. Sneaky just separated himself so much. And that's the thing he's been doing. He's been backing up a lot with those jump jets. However, when he separates himself that much from the team, not only is he, allowing himself to try to kite, to try to do more damage, to distract the members of SK, but he's also separating himself from Class, who's able to sustain and heal him up. And that's why I feel like Sneaky's been going down so many times. And there goes a Kraken. Oh, stolen by SK. Oh my goodness, this is craziness, Jaws.
Pose just came in and just whacked it once. SpaceStation did the work for him. He dashed in with his troublemaker, says thank you very much, and now Sneaky, Classed, and Joker are going to have to go on the defensive here. They use the War Treads to get out of the fight for the time being, but SK, they know it's an important one. In fact, from Hell's Heart does land on Hegman. They're going to try and go on him, taking him extremely low, but they still need to deal with that Kraken, so that's not going to matter for the time being. Pushing forward, Impale lands on 3, the Crucible a little bit too late, and Tyrus with the massive 3-man Nether form. It hits all members of SpaceStation. They just drop like flies. Class trying to run for his life as that Kraken is still marching on the base.
It's a beautiful thing, Jaws, when you know how to play Reza so well that you're able to position on the back end of the fight, getting to the back line and not having to go through anybody else. That's what the Nether Form Detonator can do. And SK is just going to continue to press into the base. This could very well be it for them.
Sneaky, Joker, they're up. Tyrus, Netherform detonation straight on the back line, but he's trying to kill that Crystal. It's going to go down way too quickly for SpaceStation to deal with, and SK will find themselves the first win of this week, and they'll go up match point versus SpaceStation.
What a beautiful thing it was, Jaws. Sneaky, however, wasn't able to do the work that he needed to. They needed to protect the carry here on the side of SpaceStation Gaming. But Cavalifar, 5-3 right now on this pedal, just doing so much work, not to mention Tyrus being able to just dive so deep and continue to chase the carries. Hegman, 2-0-8 here on this Lance. My man doing the work that the captain does.
That was over before the 20-minute mark hit as well. Off one Kraken pushing, a Kraken steal as well. SK, they find the first game. What an insane performance coming out from Tyra's. Man to watch, not surprised, performed amazingly on the Reza. We're going to throw it over to the desk though, and they can break down the SK win.
We were discussing before the game whether or not SK had enough dive to deal with Sneaky's Baron, but honestly, based off of that performance, it feels like they had a perfect plan on dealing with that Baron. Excellent job by SK to take game 1 in this series. A fairly one-sided victory, it has to be said.
Yeah, maybe we should have instead been asking, does the side of SpaceStation have enough protection for this Baron? Because every single team fight, it felt like SK was able to get onto Sneaky, and he was just a non-factor when it came down to it.
No, I mean, sure, they only have the sigils, the sustain, and the bulwark, which, as I mentioned during the draft, Reza can get over very easily with his mobility and with his ultimate especially. So SK actually turned around just like that after that Kraken steal. What an incredible performance.
Yeah, fantastic stuff coming out from SK. But it wasn't them starting the game strong. We can take a look at our first replay, which was actually SpaceStation grabbing themselves the first blood and a double kill.
Yeah, and this was just up in the lane. It seemed like SK wanted to be the ones that going aggressive, not respecting the fact that the Krull was going to be right around the corner. And then all of a sudden, the double kill eventually coming through is just, it really felt like SK not prepared for the damage that SpaceStation was going to have this early on.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a dive composition as well, it's very hard for you to fight in that lane area just because there's the protection of the turret as well. Baron can run back towards it anytime. And Petalstud didn't have her level 8, which is so important. The overdrive on the trampoline giving her more damage and increased range, helping her get onto the Baron is very vital. And SK chose to fight in the wrong time, which is why they lost that team fight.
Yeah, they lost that one based off of that, but then those factors came into their favor just a few minutes later. Around 11 minutes on into the game, SK managed to grab themselves an ace, and this is where they started to really control things.
Yeah, I mean, you can see around this time around, they're not fighting near their team, their opposing team's turret. Instead, it was SpaceStation diving in, pushing very far away from the turret, so they didn't have that much protection. And at that point, Reza just went onto the Baron. Kvalify did a really good job of following up as well. And then once Baron is down, Krull doesn't have too much to do, especially since he went for the Bonesaw first. It's his only offensive item, meaning that if he doesn't have another carry dealing the damage, the Bonesaw doesn't do much on its own.
Also, a great job by both Kvalifar and Hegman there to kite out that Krull. He only got 3 weakness stacks onto the pedal during the entire course of that trade. So a really, really well played team fight from SK and really set the tone for the rest of the game.
It did, but SpaceStation weren't out just yet. They actually managed to get themselves in a situation where they had control of Kraken almost. Then Tyra's happened. He was our player to watch, and he walked in with a Kraken steal that sealed the deal for SK.
Yeah, and it just, we were saying it, we were watching, oh, he's going to steal this. He's going to steal, like, they didn't have the way to prevent the steal, and the burst damage just didn't come out in time, and that's really just a big mistake by SpaceStation. You have a Krull Spectral Smite and the double shot from Sneaky that you can try and use to secure an objective like that, but they just didn't respect the fact that Tyrus could just walk in and take the Kraken himself, and from here, they just marched straight down the lane with the Kraken pushing. They'd been building up a lead and been in control of this game for the most part all the way throughout, and it was just a closure that they were able to find off of a huge play from Hegman.
Also, the Bulwark used just before the Kraken push actually happened meant that when SK engaged and initiated on that second turret, Lyra did not have it up. And not having that ability to peel for the Baron just means he has less and less tools to stay alive. The Reza, what a beautiful impale, by the way, from Hegman to lock multiple targets and then the Kitty wall. Reza and Petal at that point just rained so much damage onto the Baron. And as we mentioned earlier, the moment Baron is dead, SpaceStation's composition can't do anything.
Yeah, and that Krull is there just to set up the Baron, hence the Bonesaw first. So the second you get on Sneaky, the game's basically already over. And they took 4 turrets with that Kraken as well as the Vein Crystal. Let's take a look at the damage that happened during that game and see who was topping the table. Kvalifar on that Petal, unsurprisingly the top contender, but Tyra's over double the damage of the Joker during that early game.
Yeah, and again, the Joker was running this build that was mainly just to try and set up Sneaky. You see, Sneaky did get a lot of damage done, but is the trade-off worth it? And at that point, it's not at all. When you have 2 members of your opposition that are dealing the equivalent damage of your one, then it's not worth that sacrifice that you're making in order to try and put Sneaky up on that pedestal.
Indeed. And I mean, for me, it seems like SK is playing very confident. Once they hit their power spike and once they got a slight lead, they didn't stop pushing. And even though they lost the team fight and almost lost the Kraken, they made a play to make up for it. So SK showing up huge in this first game. They're going to want to go on and finish it without losing any points. Also, just because of the later on, the tiebreaker situations can be a little shaky.
This is the thing. We need to see a strong SK this week. We saw last weekend that they didn't actually manage to win out the entire weekend. G2 bested them in the finals. And this is an SK that's kind of... It feels like they've lost decisiveness as of late, but that game right there, they showed that classic SK decisiveness. They showed that they can still really have a strong performance. So I'm excited to see what SK have for the rest of the day. And if they can just kind of keep that mentality in check, make sure not to get ahead of themselves, make sure to take it a single game at a time.
Yeah, that's going to be key, is making sure that they don't start looking forward to that G2 potential matchup. Now that they have game one, you still need to focus on this team. This SpaceStation, this is still the third place team in all of Europe. They are still a formidable foe that you cannot look past. And SK, in game number one, they definitely looked like they had a clear plan. They executed exactly the way they were looking to, and I don't expect that to change going into game number two.
Absolutely. Now, we do have a substitution coming into game number two. It's going to be Esquire stepping on into the SpaceStation lineup in replacement of Sneaky. I believe a couple of connection issues for Sneaky, which means they are having to sub out that carry. So this could change things pretty significantly for SpaceStation. Sneaky is kind of the star player of this roster.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's the cornerstone of that team, especially with his picks in the lane, the Blackfeather, the Kestrel. We didn't get to see him play that. That's another thing I want to talk about, is that they went for the Baron for Sneaky, even though Kestrel was open, and it did not play very well. His performance did not seem to be too good. Maybe connection issues, like you mentioned. His positioning wasn't the best. Impales were landing on him. As a backline Baron, you definitely don't want that to have to be happening. So this will change a lot, especially when it comes to draft.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's talk about draft. We are going to be jumping in a couple of seconds' time. What are we expecting to change coming out? Obviously, they have a different player stepping in, so immediately you expect change. But the draft didn't feel as strong as maybe it needed to be in game number one anyway.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting, especially because stepping in for Sneaky, this was the one player that had been there all season long for SpaceStation, and now it's a bit of an unknown. Esquire, if he's going to be going into the lane, we don't even know that necessarily. Obviously, that's where the substitute happened, but this could be something where they rotate players around just to try and get a little bit more comfort, but we don't know what they're going to prioritize. However, SK, they get themselves the Blackfeather, and you got to figure this is going to be for Kvalfar in the lane. It's one of the picks that he is extremely comfortable and extremely talented with.
And I mean, what makes this Blackfeather so dangerous is the fact he's so versatile, especially in drafts, because you can play him both in lane and you can play him in the jungle as well. You can flex him to CP if needed also. So SK Gaming picking that up is looking great for them already in this draft. I always talk about this, especially when we watch EA play. Munchables, SpaceStation banning the Rhyme over the Blackfeather, in my opinion, is a mistake, because Blackfeather is a lot more of a threat to give over to your opponent.
Blackfeather just such a strong pick right now, especially in that weapon power lane position, but we've seen huge success in the jungle as well. Lyra was the counter pick, though, or not the counter pick, but the response coming out from SpaceStation. And then Grace and Saw have been banned off the table here. I'm curious to see where SpaceStation go with this one, whether they focus their jungle or whether they look towards the lane.
Yeah, you got to figure they're going to want something that either they go for a full-on brawl to try and match the Blackfeather. Maybe the Rona comes out here for SpaceStation. It's what has been historically used as the counter to the Blackfeather. And if SK does look for a brawling type composition, Rona works so well into that.
Yeah, I would love to say SpaceStation pick up a jungle hero right here, so that instead they go for the Vox. That's fine. Vox is very flexible as well. Can play against both the Blackfeather weapon power and can play against them as CP, because Vox is very effective at both kiting and diving. What I was going to say, though, had SpaceStation picked up a jungle pick, then they would have been able to save their last pick for a carry counter that we could see turn out, or could have seen turn out as a Rona, but regardless, they don't decide to go for that.
Yeah, I'm not going for that one just yet. We're going for a Vox, which, you know, typical safe pick. Very good into the Blackfeather as well, as you can dance around those fights and try and kite him during the duration there. And along with a Lyra, that carry should be able to survive decently well during these fights. So curious to see now where SK go. Obviously, with a Blackfeather first pick, you can go in pretty much any direction.
Yeah, and you expect either the Lance or the Arden to be their captain, with both the Lyra and the Grace already taken off the board. So you're going to have that big, beefy front line, and maybe even just go for the triple melee brawl composition that we've seen a lot of teams running. They're actually going to go with the Fortress and pair it with an Alpha. So not quite the big, beefy captain that we normally see, but it is still going to be a hard dive composition.
No, it is going to be a very hard diving composition. I was going to say that Batiste and Catherine are also open, but they decide not to go for that composition. Instead, Fortress and Alpha. Alpha is a very dominant jungler, and this does mean that Black Panther is going to be weapon power in lane. And with the Fortress scaling very well, and the Wolves applying the Mortal Wounds to reduce the sustain and the healing that does come out from the Lyra, it's a very strong composition for SK. However, they are going up against the Vox and the Lyra already, and now with Rona being picked up, that's a composition that can kite out very well at the same time.
I have to say, this does feel like a fairly even draft, but you can very clearly see the way that these fights are going to be going. With SK drafting the way that they have to be so aggressive, especially once we get to that mid stage of the game.
Yeah, I'm going to be really curious just to see who SK focuses in the team fights, because initially you look at this and you say, okay, you want to focus down the Vox. He's going to have that big ramp up damage, but then the Rona becomes this massive threat, and if you don't deal with her early, she can wipe your team almost in a 1v3 if she's able to get those breaking point stacks. But you also have to wonder, will this be a weapon run? Is it going to be a double weapon composition for the side of SpaceStation, or does either the Vox or the Rona end up going Crystal Power route?
I mean, it's possible. CP Vox actually does very well against this composition because it's both triple melee and has a Fortress who, with his Wolves, you have more units to bounce off of, but it's most likely going to be the double weapon power. I actually don't like the Rona pick just because in the jungle, she doesn't get as much gold and she doesn't ramp up to her items as quickly, meaning that she's either going to be squishy without defensive items or she's not going to have as much damage. So SK are the favorites in my opinion coming out of this one.
All right, SK are the favorites coming on in. They look great in game one. We'll see if they can turn this into a 2-0 and keep their world's hopes alive. Hashtag Vainglory8. Let us know whether you think SpaceStation are pushing this to 3 games or if SK have got this one in the bag. It's time to pass it back over to Jaws and Sean Ostino for game number 2.
Thanks, guys, once again for your expert analysis, and game number 2 is underway. Sean Ostino, I'm ready to get in, and SK, with every single win they rack up, it makes it harder and harder for G2 to come back as well. That's something we've got to keep in the forefront of our minds. This is the final week after all. SK drafting once again a full dive composition. We'll see if that Vox does want to go weapon power, or is he going to dip into the crystal route as well.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see that, Jaws, but I'm on the side of SK right now. I feel like these guys are going to be... just the dive potential that their team has is really, really substantial here. We especially with Fortress here, with his Truth of the Tooth, he's able to dive in and make his next attack like a short-range lunge. Doing that, too, he's able to facilitate for his allies to allow them to also get that burst of movement speed to actually come in and get in quicker, get into the fight. So it's going to be really fascinating. The Alpha, of course, we've been seeing a lot of Alpha play. Prime Directive is going to be very key for engaging, just closing those gaps really quickly between Tyrus and the enemy team, and just getting in there and doing tons of AoE damage. And then Cavalifar, what he's going to need to do is he's just going to need to execute. If we have anybody who's running away from the fight, who has a lot of missing health already thanks to Tyrus, we can have him just execute them down, take them out, and I feel like SK is going to have this one in the bag.
Eggman stole away that Trien, by the way, so eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. SK, they secure it this time around. It was 3v1 last game and SpaceStation got it, and now it's 3v1 this game and SK got it. Apparently, you only need one member to still nail to Trien. SK, though, is going to be a bit of a hot spot, or at least Cavalify will be in this lane. The poke coming out from Clast and Esquire right now, a little bit too much for him to handle. Hegman's going to have to spend a lot more time up in this lane, you can imagine, even though Cavalifar has got that book eulogies and starting off with a little bit of armor as well. Already taken down about half HP. Esquire is going to go for the back here fairly early on, and we'll see if he wants to go into weapon power, and he does, so he's going to stick with that one. No crystal power box today.
Yeah, and that could be good news for the side of SK, because now they just easily have to prioritize metal jackets across the board, and putting on that armor is going to make it a lot easier for them. And then we're going to have Joker on the other side here on SSG go ahead and prioritize some kind of armor breaker, like Bonesaw, for example, to be able to just shred the armor from SK. And that'll make it a lot easier for Esquire to be able to pierce through that armor and just burst them down much more easily. Speaking of dive, Hegman goes in.
Hegman goes in, trades half his health bar for it, but he is a fortress after all. Tyros and Joker are having a little fun time down in that Elder Treant. Tyros did actually end up taking the Elder Treant away from him and going for a rather aggressive invade yet again. Playing SpaceStation at their own game. They got invaded last time. This time they're the ones doing the invading. Tyros is going to be able to take away this back camp as well. Might even just steal this one away too. Does he get it? He does indeed. So steals away almost a complete rotation. Although Joker's going to be able to answer that one with his own rotation into SK's jungle. Although maybe in a bit of trouble as Hegman and Tyros did get the recall off here.
Yeah, it looks like Cavalifar is going to be working on some lifesteal. He's got that Barb Needle already sitting in there, and I would expect him to be going towards a Poison Shiv. We have Hegman going in against the Joker again.
Yeah, it just takes a small chunk out of him, nothing that Joker can't shake off. And let's have a look towards these team fights later on, to be honest, because one thing that stands out for me from SpaceStation, they've got a lot of abilities to engage. They've got class, you can use that passageway to the Bright Bulwark. They've also got a lot of sustain in the form of Joker picking up a Serpent's Mask, what you can imagine be his first item. But Hegman picking up Fortress, that's a lot of mortal wounds. And a lot of wounds going on to Joker right now as he falls extremely low. Class is there with the Bright Bulwark into the fray used to get out of the combat for the time being. SpaceStation rather aggressive in their defense as well. That Crystal Sentry was coming to aid, but SK, they choose to back off for the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting how we have all the dive coming out of SK, even with the Dragon's Blood contract picked up by Hegman. But in addition to that, if we look across the board, we do see SpaceStation Gaming actually have a lot of kiting potential. We do see, even though we see the Rona wants to jump in to the fight, she can also do out of the fray and get out of there. We have the bulwarks that can come up to protect the team from a lot of dive and movement abilities. However, we do have Cavalifar. Once he reaches level 6, he's going to be able to ignore that bulwark and get through there with the Rose offensive to get further into the backline. So I feel like a lot of the win condition here for SSG is they're just going to have to protect Esquire and ensure that he gets to late game and he's able to kite around the fights and just do tons of damage.
It's all about sustaining these fights, and Esquire going the Poison Shiv to sustain and deal those mortal wounds as well. SK pushing up the lane. Tyros is level 6. Cavalifar is just dinged as well, with only Hegman now just waiting to hit that level 6 mark, and that's going to be the time and opportunity you could imagine where they're actually going to want to fight. Remember, in game number 1, SpaceStation not only secured the first turret, they also secured first blood. We'll see if SK can flip the tables around this time around.
Yeah, and actually, Cavalifar has built into a Serpent's Mask as opposed to a Poison Shiv. So even though there is that healing coming out of class, he is opting for the more weapon power damage and additional lifesteal as well. So that's going to be a very interesting pickup for him. We do see the Aftershock coming out right now for Alpha. And
they want to go for an engage as well. There's the attack of the pack. There's a big prime directive onto 3 people. That Red Mist is chewing SK up though. Wait for it comes out and silences all members of SK, but Rona's already out of the fight. There's the Permanation Protocol, only hits class, and that will be Esquire jumping out of the fray as well. Although Joker gets found out once again. A big prime directive secures Tyros his first kill. In fact, a double for SK. They don't find 1, they find 2, and they find that Crystal Sentry as well.
Yeah, really good capitalization from that team fight. Finding it pretty early here too. 2 kills for SK, and their reward is a very tasty and delicious Crystal Sentry. And that's, if they keep doing that, of course, we're going to whittle that down so the jungle will all belong to SK later on. And I could see, you know, them just continuing to do that. And they're really doing well. Pushing these objectives here, invading the jungle over and over again, and that's something that we know SK to do. They just have so much aggression in them and so much confidence.
That was a lot of confidence to step up into 3 people there, Cavalifar, but hey, whatever works best for you. Does have sustain in his kit though with that Serpent's Mask, however. Esquire now, he's going to have to be rather careful because, like I mentioned, level 6 was on the horizon and only one Sonic Zoom is going to save you. And as soon as that Bright Bulwark is used as well, it's going to be an absolute field day for Tyras because they're also going to be fairly tanky as well. Tyras does have that Termination Protocol to give him what could be seen as a second life. There's no Black Feather on the other team to get max execution damage. You've, in fact, drafted the Black Feather, so there's going to be a lot of protection there in that regard also. SK pushing onto this turret, and that's one thing they are lacking just a little bit of, and that's that turret taking ability from range. That Space Station, they've at least got that to cling on to for the time being, because SK, they are not letting off the pedal. They know how much this series means to them, and in fact, infusions have been bought as well on the side of SK.
Yeah, just like we've been talking about this whole weekend, for the past few weeks really, is that SK has not been the same team that we've been seeing actually for the for the entire autumn season. Really, they've been lacking here and there. They've been having quite a few losses. There've been a few times where we haven't seen them make it to the finals, and because of that, there've been G2 has been able to catch up to them and close the gap to within 3 points. SpaceStation Gaming is not in the running for Worlds right now, but they could still upset SK and make it and disallow them from going to Worlds, which would be a crazy story if that happened, John.
Yeah, absolutely. And G2 will have the smiles on their faces, I'm sure, if that did end up happening, if SpaceStation do manage to find the next 2 games. But we are obviously in game number 2. It's only about 8 minutes in. No turrets have fallen just yet. And there's only about 2,000 gold lead on the side of SK. But I like what you were saying there, Sean. I think we have got to look at SK's past. And we have got to look at the last couple of weeks where they've not been, I wouldn't say been performing up to the standards of the first start of the split, but it's just other teams getting a lot better feel of SK. I mean, we saw them drop 2 games to Mouse Sports. One would say that it was going to be a fairly easy series for them, but falling 2-0 without even taking 1 win, it was a bit of a confusing time. I kind of watched the games back and I was like, are they really going to lose this? Are they really out of the running at this point in this week? It was kind of a crazy time. And speaking of crazy times, actually, say SpaceStation one trying to take that turret. Tyra's going in for 1v3. No CC obviously in the Space Station kit, so they won't be able to lock them down at any one point, but they still get a large chunk out of that tier 1.
They do, and that's a pretty good capitalization on these team fights have been going. They've been pressuring a lot of SK, and looks like they're still going in.
Still going to try to. SK maybe looking for a moment to go in. There's a massive prime directive onto Esquire. Takes a fair bit of damage. Still trying to do damage back. Cavalifar jumps on him with the Rose Offensive. Waiting for it. It's going to get popped as well. Termination Protocol gets opened up. But Esquire is already falling. That's going to be a big red miss. Sustaining him up. But he has managed to take out Tyras, who did drop into the passive. Cavalifar is way too tanky. Sustain was too much. And that'll be Rona falling as well. SK find 2. They trade it for 1. They're even going for Class, who uses their passageway to get out. They need to bounce out though because they are low health bars as well.
Oh man, these the aggression here from SK is it's warranted because they need to continue to aggress like this if they're going to be able to succeed, win this series and move on to the semifinals and day 2. But really, man, Breaking Point actually picked up by Cavalifar. And we actually also have Hegman picking up an Atlas Pauldron, so they're going to be using that against Esquire here. Breaking Point and Poison Shiv are available to Esquire, so reducing the damage output, the damage per second coming out of Esquire is going to be a really key thing as we go on here for the rest of the game. Dragon's Eye picked up by Tyras. That's going to allow him to stack up a lot of CP damage. And we do see War Treads actually picked up by Class. So that's going to allow them to do a lot of engage into the team fights if necessary, and disengage as well, which is equally important.
Termination Protocol used by Tyras there to seemingly get a bit of damage on the gold miner, and it's actually going to get stopped here as SK go for the 2v2 engage up in the lane. Joker now finding Tyras in the 1v1. He's going to back off for the time being as SY just almost gets obliterated. In fact, he does. SK are going to be able to find that kill straight underneath that turret, and Classed as well is going to have to use that sigil for the extra speed. Joker's only just joined the fight, but Cavalifar finds the executing blow, and now it is only Joker left in their way of the ace. They find it as also, and they're going to be able to push down this first tier turret. SK Gaming, they're in a 7-1 score lead, 3k gold advantage. They want to end this right here, right now, Sean Asino. No messing around, no time to look back.
Oh my goodness, Jaws. The rotations there out of SK were just amazing. Sentry's eliminated at 12 minutes into the game. Now all the jungle belongs to SK. But the rotations, keeping a distraction on the Joker, having him fight Tyrus there around the other side of the gold miner was so key to Cavalifar and Hegman just pressuring the lane so much. Able to do that, they pressured and focused Esquire. Taking him down early, they reduced so much of the damage output coming out of SpaceStation Gaming. And it looks like further troubles, they're taking the gold mine.
Wait for it comes out. It's not going to get stolen. SK secure it. Bright Bulwark's opened up. So is that attack of the pack. They're trying to fight back with those war trades, but it's not quite working. Prime Directive onto 3 people and a 700 damage proc kills Esquire and Joker. And now Class is just going to get run down. SK following the back-to-back ace after the take of the gold miner, and then the second turret as well.
Oh man, War Treadsing back to where there was no Crystal Sentry. It was an absolute mess for SpaceStation Gaming. Maybe rotating towards the lane would have been a better option, but just because that Crystal Sentry is no longer there, these 2 turrets are going down.
They broke the base at 13 minutes. 13 minutes, not quite the quickest game we've seen in EU, but that is absolutely insanity. SK are not messing around. This full dive is something that just kind of telegraphed from the draft, really. You see that Fortress and you go, okay, they're just going to jump on Esquire and execute him. And that's exactly what's been happening. He is 0-4 right now, sitting on 2 items, yes, but more often than not, he's just kiting back with the Sonic Zoom, trying to pop boots. The War Treads are popped as well from Class, and he just cannot get away from Tyrus, who is seemingly using an aimbot on these Prime Directives, because he has not missed one, Sean.
They're really good, and he's also working towards a broken myth. That's going to allow for some additional pierce, but we don't see that much shielding on the side of SSG. They actually only have, it looks like, a kinetic shield picked up on the Joker, and that's about it. We have armor that's actually been prioritized versus Cavalifar here, and Cavalifar has actually gone for a bone saw, so he's going to be able to shred whatever armor they have there on the side of SSG. But a Shiver Steel picked up by Hegman, and he's going in.
Quiet already try and kite back, wait for it will come through, but they're still hunting him down. They end up obliterating him. Cavalifar used the Rose Offensive to get the kill. Red Mist onto 3 members of SK. He's sustaining up, but is it going to be enough? Mortal Wounds are going to be there to stop that healing coming through, and Class just gets absolutely deleted. Joker only saved by his 2 Vein Crystal turrets as he watches his members, the rest of the members of his team, fall around him.
12-1 right now, 14 minutes, nearly 15 minutes in the game. Kraken is about to spawn, and you never want to lose a team fight around the time the Kraken is going to spawn. They're just going to go ahead and clear out the jungle. SK says, you know what, your Crystal Sentry's not here, all the jungle belongs to us, and we're going to take all your gold and continue to starve you out. SSG is just having to deal with their passive gold that they're getting, some of the lane minions that are coming in from the side of SK, and we have about an 8,000 gold lead here for SK. They're 12-1 right now. If they win this next team fight, SSG is going to have a really messy situation to deal with, and it could be game for SK, just pulling a dominating game here, dominating series, really, Jaws.
There's a lot of S's in the name, so don't blame me, Sean. I'm not going to lie to you. SSG and SK Gaming, but like you said, that Kraken is now on the board. SK not prioritizing it just yet. They know SpaceStation had only a couple of seconds left on their recalls. You can imagine they want to find at least one more fight before starting that one up, or they could try something sneaky and actually just take it now, and it does look like Hegman and Tyrus toying with that idea and toying with their food at the moment. Cavalifar is going to be off to the sidelines. He finds Class. The Red Mist is going to open up with at least for Hegman's going to jump over the wall. Attack of the pack is going to get popped. There's going to be a lot of more wounds going down. Cavalifar in the back line, though, needs to sustain up in these fights, and already Esquire isolated by SK, and they find the kill. A Red Mist almost kills Cavalifar, and into the fray does. Prime Directive does land on top of him, but that Termination Protocol will keep him alive for the time being. There goes the explosion, but it's not quite enough to kill Joker. Can't quite get back up in time, although he does. Class is going to be there trying to kill him. Elder Treant survive, makes him survive for the time being, but he ends up getting cut down as the Into the Fray is used to try and chase up Hegman. SpaceStation, they're not out of this just yet. They trade 2 for 2.
Wow, the Joker is able to sustain so much in these team fights. He doesn't have the best objective-taking capabilities on this Rona, and that's why he's not necessarily going to start up the Kraken. But still, just spinning around with these red mists, getting the fortified health per second that he's spinning is just happening so often here. Good prioritization and target focus from Cavalifar there, and really smart move by him to actually back out of the fight a little bit to be able to get the kill on Esquire, just so he wasn't getting red misted down. But it's just a really dangerous situation in here, and I feel like that team fight was just so sloppy. There's just absolute chaos and havoc going everywhere. Cavalifar does have journey boots. He actually picked that up a little bit. So that's another tool to add to the dive that SK already has, and they just got to clean it up. We have infusions picked up across the board for SK right now, minus Hegman, and we've got infusions popped for the 2 weapon power carries on SpaceStation Gaming. Everybody wants to fight right now, Josh.
I mean, I'm more than happy to see more people fight. Joker survived through that entire engagement. Again, SK are piling so many resources in to try and kill Esquire, and it's happening more often than not. He hasn't even picked up a third item, damaging item. He's actually go for the metal jacket here, of all things. Out of the fray is going to get used there by Joker to get out of the combat situation for the time being, but SK are still going to take the rest of their jungle, and like you mentioned a couple of seconds ago, they are just relying, it seems, on that natural gold income for the moment to actually get by. And in fact, Esquire is going to pick up that Aegis now as well. So 2 defensive items, 2 full defensive items on board now, Sean. It's a dire straits for him, and in fact, SK are going to find another engagement, but Joker, he's spinning around, get out of his way. Esquire using that ultimate to try and get the science on, but once again, SK find him in the back of the fight, and into the fray will find one at least, but Esquire finds the dirt, and that'll be Tyrus popping that massive prime directive and a spontaneous combustion, or not a termination protocol even. There's no petal in this game, but Joker is going to fall, and that'll be a triple kill going over to Cavalifar. SK find the ace. Have they got enough time to take their base? I think they do. SpaceStation go blasting off again, Sean Austin, and this is going to be game.
That is exactly what SK needed to do right there. Target prioritization, focus down Esquire, and you know what? Don't mess with the Joker. Just take down Clast. He is the weaker, squishier of the remaining carries, and this Vayne shatters. SK taking the series 2-0 right now. Really well played right there. Dominating fashion from them. And look at Cavalifar, 10-1 on this Black Feather. Just amazing. And Tyrus too, 10 assists, 14 assists for Hegman. Their team synergized so well right there, and they're going to be moving on to day 2 today, Jaws.
Almost 100% kill participation on both Tyrus and Cavalifar as well. 15 out of the 17 kills that went across to SK, they were able to be a part of. They are looking for their world spot. They are inching closer and closer to it. A team that was so dominant in this split, had a couple of hiccups in the last couple of weeks, have really stepped up their game in this final weekend, and you can see exactly what they're aiming for. They're looking towards Worlds, they're looking towards Singapore, and it's going to be SK moving on to day number 2. But we'll go to the desk now, and they can break down their SK victory one more time.
There we have it, SK taking this one 2-0, and we have blasted through the first series of the day already. A victory for SK Gaming.